The scent of freshly baked bread and ripe plantains filled the warm air of Miguel and Isabel's small family-owned grocery store, tucked in the heart of Miami's Little Havana. The holiday decorations, strands of colorful lights draped across the storefront, a plastic nativity scene nestled in the window, gave the place a festive charm, but Rafael didn't feel like celebrating. Christmas Eve was supposed to be about family, about warmth, about belonging, but tonight, like so many nights before, he felt like an outsider in his own home. At 35 years old, Rafael had spent the last decade working tirelessly as a restaurant manager at one of Miami's busiest Cuban eateries. He wasn't wealthy, but he had always done his best to support his parents when they needed help. Since July, he had been sending them money each month to help cover their grocery store's mortgage. A store that had been struggling for years due to growing competition. He never expected praise or recognition for it. He simply wanted to help. But tonight, as he sat at the dinner table, watching his 32-year-old brother Diego bask in their parents' endless admiration, Rafael could feel something was wrong. Diego, with his sharp suit and easy charisma, had always been the golden child. A successful real estate agent, he exuded confidence, charm, and a natural ability to win people over. Their parents had always treated him like he could do no wrong. While Rafael, quiet and responsible, had spent years feeling like an afterthought. It had never been more obvious than tonight. As his mother, Isabel, placed a plate of lechon asado in front of Diego, she smiled warmly and patted his shoulder. "Mijo, we don't know what we would have done without your help," she said. "This year has been so hard, but because of you, we've managed to keep everything afloat." Rafael's fork froze mid-air. His father, Miguel, nodded in agreement. "You really stepped up, Diego. We're proud of you." A ripple of confusion and disbelief ran through Rafael's body. What were they talking about? He had been the one sending them money. He had been tightening his own budget, skipping nights out, working extra shifts, just to make sure their store survived. He glanced at Diego, expecting him to correct the mistake, to tell their parents that he had nothing to do with the money they'd been receiving. But Diego just smiled modestly, lifting his glass. "Of course, Papa," he said smoothly. "Family takes care of each other." Rafael felt the blood rush to his face. His heart pounded. He turned to his parents, his voice tight. "Wait. What do you mean? Diego helped you?" His mother looked at him with mild irritation, as if he were being difficult on purpose. "He's been sending us money every month, Rafael," she said. "He didn't tell us at first, but we found out, and we're so grateful." Rafael's stomach dropped. The room felt suddenly smaller, the twinkling Christmas lights glaring in his vision. Diego had taken credit for his generosity, and their parents believed him without question. A tense silence settled over the dining table, the only sound coming from the distant hum of holiday music playing from an old radio near the cash register. Rafael's grip on his fork tightened as he stared at his parents, hoping, praying, that he had misheard them. But their faces radiated unwavering admiration for Diego, as if he truly was the selfless son who had sacrificed for their well-being. A bitter taste coated Rafael's tongue, drowning out the rich flavors of the Christmas feast spread before him. His brother Diego lounged back in his chair, effortlessly playing the role of the humble benefactor. He swirled the wine in his glass before taking a slow sip, his smirk barely concealed. The audacity of it all made Rafael's stomach churn. Diego knew. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was enjoying it. Rafael took a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain steady. "That's not true," he said, setting his fork down carefully. "I've been the one sending you money every month, since July." A heavy pause fell over the table. His mother, Isabel, gave him a disapproving look, her brow furrowing as if his words had personally offended her. "Rafael, don't do this," she said with a sigh. "It's Christmas Eve. There's no need to cause a scene." Miguel, his father, simply shook his head. "Your brother showed us proof, Rafael. He's been sending the money." "Proof?" The word sent a wave of disbelief through Rafael's system. His jaw clenched. He turned to Diego, his pulse pounding in his ears. "You showed them proof?" he asked, his voice laced with quiet fury. Diego finally looked at him directly, feigning an expression of mild confusion. "Yeah," he said with a casual shrug. "A few bank transfers here and there. You know how it is." "No," Rafael snapped, his patience thinning. "I don't know how it is, because I was the one sending that money." His father's expression darkened, his frustration now evident. "Enough," Miguel said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You've always been a hard worker, Rafael, but don't ruin this night because you're feeling jealous." Jealous. The word hit Rafael like a slap to the face. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, and undervalued suddenly came rushing to the surface. He had never asked for recognition. He had never expected his parents to favor him over Diego. All he had wanted was to help them, to make sure their grocery store didn't crumble under the weight of financial stress. And now, when he finally spoke up, they refused to believe him. His hands tightened into fists under the table. "You think I'm lying?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "You think I would make this up?" Diego exhaled dramatically and set down his glass. "Look, man," he said, feigning concern. "I get it. It's been a tough year. Maybe you sent some money too. I don't know. But Mom and Dad know I've been helping them out. They saw the transactions." Rafael's breath hitched in his chest. "What transactions?" Diego smiled now, fully in control of the moment, as he pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times before turning it toward their parents, displaying what appeared to be transaction receipts. "See? Like clockwork," he said smoothly. Miguel leaned in and nodded approvingly. "That's right. That's exactly what you showed us before." Rafael's world tilted. Diego had actually faked transactions? His heart slammed against his ribs. He pulled out his own phone, determined to prove the truth. His fingers moved quickly, navigating to his banking app. But as he pressed the login button, an error message flashed on the screen. "We are experiencing a major technical issue. All services are temporarily unavailable." Panic stabbed through him like a knife. He refreshed the screen, again and again. Nothing. Diego laughed under his breath. "Wow, what a coincidence," he said, crossing his arms. "The one time you need to prove something, your bank suddenly isn't working?" Miguel shook his head, disappointment etched deep into his face. "Rafael, just stop." Isabel sighed. "You need to apologize to your brother." Rafael's body went rigid. Apologize? For telling the truth? His father's voice turned cold. "If you can't back up your story, you can pack your things and leave." Rafael stared at him, stunned, feeling the weight of those words settle deep in his chest. They had already made their choice. Without another word, he pushed back his chair and stood up sharply, the legs scraping against the tile floor. His face burned with a mix of rage, humiliation, and sorrow, but he refused to let them see him break. He grabbed his coat, turned toward the door, and walked out into the warm Miami night, the distant hum of Christmas music ringing hollow in his ears. The humid Miami night wrapped around Rafael like a suffocating blanket as he stepped out onto the quiet street, his parents' voices still ringing in his ears. The sting of their rejection cut deep. But more than that, the injustice of it all burned in his chest. His own brother had stolen his generosity and turned it into a lie. twisting their parents' perception of him in the process. He wanted to march back in, force them to listen, shake them until they realized the truth. But what was the point? They had already chosen to believe Diego. As he unlocked his car, his hands trembled, his pulse hammering through his temples. He yanked the door open and collapsed into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He stared at his phone, his one chance at proving himself, but the banking app was still stuck on the same frustrating error message. We are experiencing a major technical issue. All services are temporarily unavailable. He exhaled sharply, slamming the back of his head against the seat. Of all the nights for a system outage, it had to be tonight. It wasn't enough that Diego had taken credit for his kindness. Now Rafael was left with nothing but his word, and that had never been enough for his parents. He had always been the quiet, responsible son, the one who worked hard but never made waves. Diego? Diego had always been the charming one, the talker, the golden boy. And Rafael? He was invisible. The bitter thought settled in his chest like a weight, pressing against his ribs. Would they ever see him the way they saw Diego? Would they ever believe him over the brother who had stolen the spotlight for as long as he could remember? He needed to clear his head. Without really thinking, he put the car in drive and pulled away from his parents' house, navigating the familiar streets of Little Havana. The holiday lights strung up along the palm trees and small mom-and-pop shops felt mocking now, a reminder of the warmth he had expected to find tonight, but had instead been shut out of. After a few turns, he found himself in front of Mateo's apartment complex, a small, run-down building above a bar that always smelled like fried plantains and cheap rum. Rafael hadn't even realized he had been heading here, but maybe it made sense. Mateo had been his closest friend since college, the one person who never made him feel like he was second best. With a tired sigh, Rafael parked and made his way up the stairs, knocking twice before the door swung open. Mateo took one look at his face and frowned. That bad, huh? Rafael let out a bitter laugh. Worse. Mateo stepped aside, motioning him in. All right, man, spill it. Rafael sat heavily on the couch, running a hand down his face before launching into the full story. As he spoke, anger replaced exhaustion, the injustice of it all fueling him again. Mateo listened, nodding occasionally, his brows furrowing deeper with each detail. So let me get this straight, Mateo said when Rafael finally finished. You've been sending them money for months? Diego finds out, takes credit for it, and when you call him out, your parents believe him instead? Rafael exhaled slowly. Pretty much. Mateo let out a low whistle. Damn, your brother's a real piece of work. Rafael scoffed. Tell me something I don't know.
Mateo rubbed his chin, thinking, and you have no way to prove it because your banking app is down? Exactly. Rafael leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. I have nothing, man. And Diego had the nerve to show them fake receipts? Who even does that? Mateo's expression darkened. A liar who knows no one's going to question him. The words hit harder than Rafael expected. That was the problem, wasn't it? Diego knew that as long as he said it with enough confidence, their parents would never doubt him. Rafael sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't even know what to do. I can't just show up tomorrow with nothing. They'll just say I'm making excuses. Mateo leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, deep in thought. Then, suddenly, his eyes lit up. Wait! Rafael glanced up. What? Mateo grabbed his own phone. When you send money, doesn't your bank send confirmation emails? Rafael blinked, his mind racing to catch up. What? You know, those automated emails that say your transfer was successful or whatever, Mateo explained. Those wouldn't be tied to the banking app, right? You'd still have access to them. Rafael felt his breath catch. The emails? Of course. His heart pounded as he scrambled for his phone. pulling up his email app. His fingers moved frantically, typing in the search bar. Bank transfer confirmation. Within seconds, the results popped up like a beacon in the darkness. Dozens of transaction emails, each one listing his name, the amounts, and the date of every payment sent to his parents' account. He stared at the screen, stunned. It had been sitting there all along. Mateo leaned over his shoulder, scanning the emails before letting out a low chuckle. Oh, man, he said, shaking his head. You've got him now. Rafael let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Relief and determination crashed over him in equal measure. For the first time that night, he felt a flicker of control returning. He wasn't gonna let Diego get away with this. Tomorrow, he was walking back into that house, and this time, he had the proof. The warm night air of Little Havana carried the scent of roasting pork and fresh Cuban bread, but Rafael barely noticed as he walked out of Mateo's apartment and into the dimly lit streets. His heart was still racing from the discovery of the emails, his mind running in circles about what would happen tomorrow. He had the proof he needed now, but the damage had already been done. His parents had already dismissed him. Would they even be willing to listen? Would they just brush off his evidence the same way they had brushed him off his entire life? He didn't want to go home yet, not to his empty apartment where he would be left alone with his thoughts. He needed somewhere to breathe, somewhere familiar yet detached from the chaos of the night. Without thinking much about it, he found himself pulling into the parking lot of his favorite late-night Cuban cafe, a small, no-frills spot tucked between a liquor store and a laundromat. The neon sign in the window flickered slightly, reading Cafe Solano, open 24 hours. The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped inside. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a couple of older men playing dominoes in the corner and a tired waitress wiping down the counter. The place smelled of strong coffee and fried plantains, a scent that had always comforted him since childhood. He slid into a booth by the window, resting his elbows on the table and rubbing his face with both hands, exhaling the weight of the night. A waitress, a woman in her 50s with deep smile lines and tired eyes, walked over with a notepad. Cafecito? She asked knowingly, as if she had seen this kind of exhaustion before. He nodded. Yeah, extra strong. As she walked away, Rafael pulled out his phone again, scrolling through the email confirmations for what felt like the 100th time. The evidence was there, clear as day. Every transaction, every date, every amount. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't lying. So why did it still feel like he had lost? His cafecito arrived in a small white cup, the rich, bitter aroma filling the air. He took a slow sip, letting the sharp bite of the espresso cut through his exhaustion. Across the street, he could see the glow of holiday lights wrapped around palm trees, a reminder that it was still Christmas Eve. Not that it felt like it. Tomorrow he would face them again. Tomorrow he would set the record straight. But tonight he just needed a moment to breathe. The night stretched on as Rafael sat in the quiet cafe, his fingers absently tapping against his coffee cup. His exhaustion was bone deep, but his mind refused to settle. The betrayal, the humiliation, the sheer frustration of being dismissed so easily, it all clawed at him. His parents had never even hesitated before siding with Diego. It was as if Rafael's word meant nothing to them, as if a lifetime of doing the right thing, of being steady and reliable, had amounted to absolutely nothing in their eyes. He sighed, slumping further into the booth. His phone sat on the table, the banking app still useless, the error message unchanged. A part of him wanted to throw the damn thing across the cafe. He had never needed proof before. He had always just done the right thing because it was the right thing. But tonight, for the first time, he realized doing the right thing meant nothing, if no one saw it. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. Mateo, you still at the cafe? Rafael hesitated before typing back. Yeah, just thinking. A moment later, Mateo responded. Come back, I think I have an idea. Curiosity flickered through Rafael's exhaustion. He tossed a few bills on the table and left the cafe, the cold night air doing little to clear the frustration coiling in his chest. 15 minutes later, he was back in Mateo's apartment, the dim lighting casting shadows over the stacks of books, and half-finished paintings scattered across the space. Mateo, still in his work clothes from the bar, was sitting cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through his own phone. You remember, Mateo said without looking up, that banks send confirmation emails every time you transfer money. Rafael blinked, his breath hitched. The emails. Why hadn't he thought of that before? His hands moved before his brain caught up, grabbing his phone and swiping over to his email app. His fingers trembled as he typed in the search bar. Bank transfer confirmation. Seconds later, his inbox filled with exactly what he needed. Months worth of transaction confirmations, each one neatly time-stamped with the exact dates and amounts he had sent to his parents' account. His chest tightened, this time not with anger, but with sheer relief. The evidence had been there all along. He just hadn't known where to look. Mateo leaned over his shoulder, scanning the emails before whistling lowly. Damn, he muttered. It's all here. Every single transfer. Rafael stared at the screen, his heartbeat steadying for the first time all night. This was it. This was undeniable proof. Diego was about to be exposed. A slow, satisfied exhale left Rafael's lips. I have him now. Mateo grinned, slapping a hand against Rafael's back. Hell, yeah, you do. For the first time since the night began, Rafael felt something shift. Tomorrow, when he walked back into that house, he wouldn't just be another forgotten afterthought. He wouldn't be the quiet son, the overlooked one, the one whose word never seemed to matter. Tomorrow, he was walking in with the truth. And for once, they would have no choice but to listen. The sun had barely risen when Rafael pulled into his parents' driveway on Christmas morning. The small grocery store below their apartment was still shuttered, the holiday-keeping business quiet for the day. Inside, however, the house was full. Relatives, laughter, the clinking of dishes. It was the same every year. Christmas morning meant brunch with the whole family, meant cousins running around, meant warmth and familiarity, but this year it felt different. This year, Rafael wasn't here just for Christmas. He was here to set the record straight. He sat in his car for a moment, gripping his phone in his lap, the email confirmations glowing on the screen like a shield. This was it, the truth in undeniable form. Diego had stolen his credit. His parents had called him a liar. Now, they were about to see just how wrong they had been. Taking a deep breath, Rafael stepped out of the car and walked up to the front door. The scent of his mother's arroz con leche wafted through the air as he pushed it open. The chatter inside momentarily paused when they saw him, before quickly resuming as if nothing had happened. As if last night hadn't happened. He spotted Diego first, leaning comfortably against the counter, dressed in a crisp button-down, chatting with an uncle like he had no cares in the world, like he hadn't just spent the night lying to their entire family. Their mother, Isabel, was plating food, a warm smile spreading across her face. You came, she said, a touch of surprise in her voice. Diego smirked, folding his arms across his chest. Decided to come back and apologize? He asked, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. Rafael's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he turned to the room, making sure everyone was watching. If he was going to do this, he was going to do it in front of the entire family. No, Rafael said, voice even. I came to tell the truth. A hush fell over the gathering. His parents exchanged uneasy glances, while Diego's smirk flickered for the briefest moment before quickly returning. Rafael, Miguel, his father, sighed. We're not doing this again. Yes, we are, Rafael said firmly. He pulled out his phone, lifting it so everyone could see. Because last night, you called me a liar. Last night, you said Diego had been the one sending you money. But I have proof that every single transfer came from me. The room was silent now. Diego laughed, rolling his eyes. Oh, come on, man, he scoffed. You really expect everyone to believe that? You could have just made those up. I already showed them my receipts. Rafael didn't flinch. Did you? He asked, tilting his head slightly. Or did you show them fake receipts? Because I'd love to compare them to the actual bank records. His mother shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Diego, who no longer looked as confident. Miguel cleared his throat, his doubt creeping in now. Diego, show us the receipts again. Diego hesitated. My phone's dead, he lied. Rafael almost laughed at the irony. Convenient, he said. Then he turned to his father. If you don't believe me, let's check your bank's transaction records. The deposits will show exactly where the money came from. Miguel's expression hardened as the room waited for Diego's response. And for the first time, Diego had nothing to say. His silence was damning. Rafael's stomach tightened as his father stood slowly, walking to grab his coat. Let's check, Miguel said, his voice firm. Isabel's face was pale now, but she didn't object. Diego's eyes darted around the room, his smirk completely gone. This is ridiculous, he muttered. But no one spoke up for him. The drive to the nearest ATM was silent, tension thick in the air. Rafael stood behind his father as Miguel punched in his PIN, scrolling through transaction records. And then, there it was. Every deposit, every transfer, Rafael's name next to each one, not a single cent from Diego. Miguel stared at the screen, his face unreadable. Slowly, he turned back to Rafael, his expression shifting from doubt to realization. You were telling the truth, he said quietly. Rafael didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was right there. When they returned home, the atmosphere had changed. The room was tense, Diego standing near the door like he was ready to bolt. Miguel looked at him with disappointment in his eyes. Diego, he said, his voice low but firm. You lied to us. Diego scoffed. Oh, come on, he muttered. It's not that big of a deal. His mother sucked in a sharp breath, as if hearing him say it aloud finally made it real for her. Diego, she whispered, looking at him like she was seeing him for the first time. The rest of the family watched in stunned silence, processing what had just been revealed. And Diego? Diego did what he always did when he was backed into a corner. He ran. He grabbed his keys, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out the door. No one stopped him. The door slammed shut, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence. For the first time, the entire family turned to Rafael, and this time they saw him. The house felt emptier after Diego left, the tension still lingering like a storm that had just passed. The silence stretched on, heavy and uncomfortable, as if everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. Rafael stood near the doorway, his body still tense, his mind still reeling from everything that had just happened. For the first time in years, his parents had no words, no immediate defenses, no dismissals. They knew the truth now, and for once, Rafael wasn't the one left scrambling for validation. His father, Miguel, was the first to break the silence. He let out a long, weary sigh and rubbed a hand down his face. We owe you an apology, he said, his voice quieter than Rafael had ever heard it. A big one. Isabel nodded slowly, her eyes still wide with shock. Mijo, we were wrong. The words seemed painful for her to say, like they carried the weight of years of overlooking him. We should have believed you. The apology landed, but Rafael felt strangely numb to it. He had waited for this moment for years, for his parents to finally see him, to acknowledge his worth, but now that it was here, it didn't feel like the victory he had once imagined. There was no satisfaction in proving his brother a liar, no joy in watching Diego storm out. There was just exhaustion. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. It's not just about last night, he said, his voice measured but firm. This has been happening my whole life. No matter what I do, it's never enough compared to Diego. You always assume the best of him and the worst of me. He shook his head, swallowing the lump in his throat. And I let it go for years. I let it slide because I thought maybe one day you'd see me the way you see him. Isabel's eyes glistened with guilt, and Miguel looked away, as if he couldn't face the truth of what his son was saying. We were unfair to you, Miguel admitted, voice heavy, and that's on us. Raphael nodded, but forgiveness didn't come as easily as their words did. I appreciate the apology, he said after a long moment, but it doesn't just erase everything. It's going to take time. His mother reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Then we'll take the time, she whispered. We'll do better. The promise felt genuine, and for the first time, Raphael thought maybe, just maybe, they meant it. A few minutes later, Isabel wordlessly placed a plate of food in front of him, the same way she had done for Diego earlier, but this time it felt different. This time it felt like recognition. And as Raphael finally sat down, surrounded by family, the weight of years of invisibility began to lift, just a little. The story of Raphael's struggle for recognition and truth highlights an important lesson about self-worth, standing up for oneself, and the consequences of favoritism within families. For years, Raphael had quietly sacrificed for his family, believing that his actions alone would be enough to earn their respect. However, he learned that sometimes the truth needs to be fought for, not just for the sake of proving others wrong, but to reclaim one's own dignity. His parents' blind favoritism toward Diego was a painful reality that many experience in family dynamics. The lesson here is that unquestioned loyalty to one person at the expense of another can lead to deep, lasting wounds. Raphael's decision to confront the truth, despite the risk of rejection, teaches that self-advocacy is necessary, even when it's difficult. Ultimately, this story also reminds us that apologies, though important, do not instantly heal years of hurt. Trust and respect must be rebuilt over time through actions, not just words. Raphael didn't need to be the favorite to be valued. He just needed to demand the recognition he deserved. His journey proves that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought for our own worth.